Thanks everybody for bearing with us this afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here with our panel of privacy experts across government. And briefly, I'm going to introduce myself and then have each of our panelists introduce themselves. I'm the Vice President for Public Sector at High Software, and our company provides technology solutions that help agencies implement privacy best practices and to ensure compliance with regulatory standards across their technology solutions. And today, we wanted to speak a little bit about the intersection of open government, all of the media and social media technologies that we've been talking about today, the mandate for agencies to make information available, transparent, and open, and how that impacts privacy as well. And I like to sort of sometimes say that we should come out here with our Darth Vader mask because before we were ready to come out today, I was doing some preparation with a panelist last week, and I was at a technology conference, a SharePoint conference in California, and sitting with a number of technologists, SharePoint technology folks from different agencies, stepped out of the room to speak to everybody in a call where we talked about how there's this sort of misperception across government that privacy and security always leads with a no. No, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. And then I went back into the room with all of the guys that were working on SharePoint, and they said, well, privacy is where IT goes to die. So we're here hopefully to dispel that myth. And I'd like to start by having Jonathan introduce himself and tell us a little bit about what he does.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Cantor. I'm the Chief Privacy Officer and Director of Open Government at the Department of Commerce. So at Commerce, I handle the privacy program for the entire department and work with all the parts of Commerce. And I also steer the department's open government and other transparency programs, including the Freedom of Information Act and the Federal Advisory Committee Act activities. So I do both. It's an interesting kind of mix of things. They're not as diverse as everybody would think they were, but I'll talk about that in a few minutes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Roanne Shaddix. I'm a Senior Privacy Specialist with the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation's Privacy Program, and I've been there about 4 years now, and we're a full-service shop. We're housed within the Office of the CIO and CISO, and we do everything from privacy risk assessments to employee awareness and training, policies and procedures, and so forth. So we'll talk more about that as well.
And I'm Stephen Lott. I'm actually the Privacy Program Manager at the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and Roanne and I work together as a team. And that's how we do our work there as a team. There's 3 other specialists that work with Roanne and I. And as she said, we report to the CISO as well as the Chief Privacy Officer, who happens to be the Chief Information Officer, as well as the Departmental IT Director. So our boss has 3 hats. One boss has 3 hats, and one boss has a pretty big hat to fill. Also represent FDIC on the Federal CIO Privacy Committee. One of the things that I've done in the past with the Leadership and Educational Development Group was to help develop training for Chief Privacy Officers across the government. It was very successful. We had several hundred people attend, and we continue to do good work with that council. So,
great.
There you go.
Well, thanks all of you for joining us. So Jonathan, I'd like to start with you. I think you have a very interesting title in that you're both Chief Privacy Officer and Director of Open Government. And I think some people would think that those are actually almost a contradiction, but why don't you tell us a little bit about where you see the checks and balances of the 2 roles and then some of the synergies as well.
Okay. I mean, there's definitely tensions in the role. Certainly people are like, well, you can't be all about privacy and then be all about open government because you sort of have this natural tension. You're saying, well, certain data can't be disclosed. Well, open government is not about preventing people from getting access to things that, for example, a law says you can't have access to. That sort of information's always been off the table. It was off the table in the discussion that the President and the Office of Management and Budget put out from day one. What was interesting about it, though, is, of course, there's a lot of open government about data about people. So, one key piece of it is making sure that you have that right balance between what's going out about people and then, of course, that it's not identifying people. And that's sort of the standard tension push-pull between the two, is making sure that you're drawing that line in the right place. And there's certainly been a lot of work between the 2 communities and folks like me trying to bridge the gap between them. But of course, there's also a lot of synergies between the group. One piece of privacy that a lot of people don't think about is sort of what I'll call the historical principled notion of privacy. And there are pieces in there that deal with hardcore transparency ideas that people should be able to see data about themselves and should be able to correct and have access to that, not simply because it's a notional right. It's certainly a bedrock principle within this country that you sort of don't have secret government records and things like that because you sort of have a right to know, but also because if the government, or in our case with open government, other data users are going to be using data down the road that's been sort of extrapolated from that, and that data is wrong to begin with, then that data is not going to be as useful as it could be as you move down the road with it. So as it's extrapolated into data sets or other tools, it's wrong to begin with, well, then the margins of error continue to increase, and therefore the decisions you're going to be making down the road aren't as useful, aren't as helpful. And we see that already with health outcomes and things like that. And so, of course, there's a wonderful relationship between the two, that by being more transparent to individual users, individual data subjects, you are actually, in the end, making that data more useful down the road. And so one of the things I've tried to do at Commerce, and also in my prior hat where I used to work at Social Security, was to encourage the agency to be more transparent to the record subjects, to actually get those records to be more correct in the first instance so that down the road they're more useful. So I've done other activities which relate to social media as well, and done that through the same privacy committee that Stephen was talking about as the chair of the Innovation and Emerging Technologies subgroup. And so we really try to work these things sort of into, I guess what I'll call my dual hat role, is encouraging this sort of conversation to make sure that what's going in is actually more accurate than it would be. So.
Great, thanks. And Roanne, I know that you've done a lot of work with the Federal CIO Council Best Practices Subcommittee on Privacy. So can you share with us a little bit about the work of that committee and some of the resources that are available to agencies across government through that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's a highly collaborative committee, and it's co-chaired by chief privacy officers from DHS and DOJ and VA. And the Best Practices Subcommittee, but the committee as a whole, Privacy Committee as a whole, has been really working to, I think, demystify privacy. As you said, a lot of people may have some negative connotations when they think of privacy. They think that projects may not succeed because you have to go talk to the privacy professional in your organization. They don't really understand what it all means. So we've really been trying to produce resources and embed privacy principles that Jonathan talked about into existing federal frameworks, such as the Federal Enterprise Architecture Security and Privacy Profile. We're currently working and had about a 2-year working relationship with NIST on adding a new set of privacy controls to the 853 publication. That will be a landmark objective and accomplishment, because it'll be the first time that wherever security goes, so will go privacy principles and standards. But we really hope that these tools, these resources will help to educate and empower all stakeholders, not just the new privacy professional, but also CIOs and CISOs, anybody who wants to know what privacy is about and how to implement it, whether it's across the organization like Jonathan has to do, and we're trying to do at our organizations, but also apply certain principles and requirements to specific initiatives like open government and social media and so forth.
Great. And can you tell us a little bit about the role of a privacy professional within an agency and some of the responsibilities?
Well, it is not to say no. We like IT and technology and all the new stuff just as much as everybody else. So our job really is to be, I think, an enabler. We're supposed to work with the project teams, work with the program managers, the agency leadership, and try to be their advisor. If a good privacy professional will come in and help to give you a short-term as well as long-term strategy to meet that production deadline, sometimes we have to say no, but it's more like no, but let us see if we can find the right strategy to accomplish what you want to do and meet your mission, but do it in a privacy-safe way. So I think the privacy person of the past has really evolved into this strategic advisor, if you will, and someone who's a real partner with your projects.
Great. And Stephen, what are some of the things that FDIC has been doing, or you've been doing with FDIC to help implement some of these practical programs?
Well, we've been doing a lot of stuff, but I must say that everything that was mentioned by my colleagues here. It's the fair information practice principles that we're trying to uphold, and we have to include these in anything that we do. For those of you who don't know what FDIC does, we are the people that insure your money up to $250,000 in your account. And
Very
if you're lucky to have more, we'll insure that as well, but it must be a separate account. But we have been involved with a lot of the financial events over the past several years. Thus, we've had to increase our workforce from about 5,000 up to about 10,000 Fed employees, as well as thousands of contractors. So at FDIC, to get more back down to what you really asked, I can go to the program level. Everybody has heard of SharePoint. Our privacy group has took it upon ourselves several years ago. Actually, things in the government don't happen quickly, as you know. So when we first rolled out SharePoint at FDIC, basically the privacy office was the last to know. Normally we are the first to know because we do have a very strategic process in that any system or development effort, new applications actually come across our desk. For some reason, SharePoint missed our desk, but we were implementing our program over the years, and so that was just one of the things that missed, but it was a big miss. But we were able to jump immediately on the bandwagon with SharePoint and work with our team to basically create a tagging mechanism so that when we rolled out the next version of SharePoint, everybody in FDIC now actually has to tag whether the information is sensitive or if it's personally identifiable information or not. So that was a very big accomplishment. We're sort of like using, or I could say, Roanne, I think it's okay that we're sort of using SharePoint as our sort of short-term storage solution, especially during these the bank efforts that we're having to deal with every weekend. So that's one of the things that we're doing, and very proud to have done that. Another deal with the cloud. We're really not supposed to talk about the cloud because we're not in the cloud, so to speak. However, as with any other agency, we do have vendors that we hire by contract. And so over the past several years, we've actually had to increase our contracting efforts and hire a lot of vendors to help us manage all of this data that we've been collecting from the banks, because we end up selling the assets, the bad stuff, the good stuff. And so what we have done with the privacy program is we've taken a look at all of our contract clauses to make sure that they were up to date and current, and that they not only just included the General Government Privacy Act clause, but actually included additional privacy requirements, such as privacy impact assessments. If you're maintaining sensitive data, we actually have to make sure that we go through that process. Another thing with our vendors, we had a small vendor management program that actually sort of stemmed from our security group. Now, we talked so quickly at the very beginning, I don't know if we really explain how we're located in the office. We are under the Chief Information Security Officer, which is sort of unusual because you would think that we would be a privacy office by ourselves. But one of the good things about placing the privacy program under the Chief Information Security Officer is that you get to work with all your security professionals. They're looking at confidentiality, and integrity, availability, all of that stuff, and we're pushing privacy protection on that side of the house. So back to the vendor methodology, they actually had a program, and I think we were one of the few federal agencies, and we're very small. We're not one of these big agencies like Jonathan over here. But we've always gone out and we've looked at our high-risk vendors. And so what we did was we married the privacy and security programs together along with our clause effort. We made sure that our security clauses were also updated. And then we ended up creating checklists so that our information security managers that are placed within each of our divisions and also act as privacy representatives are able to, whenever they get a contract or any kind of procurement, they can actually take this checklist, they go down, they look at the security artifacts that they need to be collecting and looking at, as well as looking at the privacy artifacts that they have to make sure are available. So that's another great effort that we've done. I can keep talking. I have several things. I don't know how long
If I
we
could
have. 8
dive in.
minutes.
Yeah, please
Yeah,
do.
I just wanted to jump in. I know if anybody works in federal agencies in this area in IT, you've heard of the Privacy Impact Assessment. It was a requirement from the E-Government Act. And you know, a lot of people say it's just a paper exercise and you have to get it done and then put it on a shelf and the system goes on and goes into production. But really, that process can really serve as a great focal point to bring all the various stakeholders to the table. The best projects, most successful projects I've been involved with have been those that actually take that exercise really seriously, because it really helps to get a common understanding in plain English about what that system is intended to do. And it forces the discussion from everything, you know, the fair information practice principles that we talked about. You know, what data is going to be collected? How long is it going to be maintained? Who's it going to be shared with? What are the Privacy Act implications? It really forces a broad understanding, and because sometimes you find that various stakeholders, because of this siloed effect that we have, we're all in our various, work in our various disciplines, we may not really understand what the other party is doing around the system. So it really helps to bring together people and really understand. And that document doesn't go into a binder that sits on a shelf. It goes out onto the public website. So, you know, it has to be very consumer friendly.
And one of the great things about it is it should be reviewed and updated every time you're reviewing everything about the system for the certification and accreditation. And it's a very natural process. And one of the things that we've done, back to the Privacy Committee, that we've talked about, is we've done a specialized one, which is now codified in OMB guidance for social media. And you guys were talking about one specialized one sort of on your vendor process, and we're now pushing the same sort of process for cloud computing, where we're starting to look at some of the sort of special things. So one of the other things I'm doing is I'm co-chairing a sort of effort on cloud computing, and we're looking at a whole bunch of issues that sort of come up in cloud computing contracts and transitions to the cloud, one of which is privacy. And you know, one of the things we're looking at are sort of the need to kind of get into the contracts that you would put out there with a cloud service provider, sort of the need to be able to document and have that discussion with your vendor to be able to document what you need for a privacy impact assessment. And we're actually talking about some additional things to kind of tease out in the discussion so that they will sort of become part of a cloud computing PIA. And again, it's the tool that's useful because as Roanne was talking about, it's the process, the analytical process, the team building on the project team that it requires you not so much to do it, it's the idea that you're going to be putting a team effort sort of down on paper, which is then transparent enough, getting back to the transparency theme, you know, it's so the public can get an understanding of what it is that you do and why it is that you do it. You know, it's not so much just a piece of compliance documentation, which I think a lot of folks have a tendency to look at it as, oh, okay, look, another piece of paper that we have to do. It goes a little deeper than that.
Definitely does.
Yeah, and certainly one of the things we've heard a lot about today is cloud, and I think one of the themes that we hear across government is that it's very important to evaluate your data before you move it to the cloud. At a past FedScoop discussion, one of the speakers talked about not everything being cloudable, and I think that that's certainly true from a privacy perspective, that agencies need to make a determination about what information can and should reside in the cloud and to evaluate it from a privacy and security perspective. But Jonathan, I wanted to pick up on something that you mentioned backstage. We were talking about some of the other speakers today who were talking about all kinds of things that they were doing with allowing people to bring their own devices into work potentially, and a lot of the things that are really exciting, I think, to all of us. But you know, really on the other side, privacy impacts 100% of the population. And I think if you were to have, you know, 5 minutes or 2 minutes with your CIO, what would you tell them they need to think about before they embrace some of these concepts? Not to say no, but to say, okay, if you want to do this, here's what you should maybe be thinking about before you embark down this path.
Well, on the privacy side of things, one of the things I always like to tell people to really think about is it has a lot to do with where's your data? Where is your data going in this idea? So when you go to the cloud, where's your data going? Do you know where it's going? Do you have an idea of where it's going? But when you start talking about, you know, mobility, in terms of personal devices and personal devices moving on, where's the data going? Do you have the ability? Are you keeping the data? Is the data going to be kept on those devices remotely? What happens if you need that data? You know, what happens if you need that data and it's something that you can't control? It's something that's needed, like for a lawsuit, for years. Where, you know, are you prepared to deal with the risks and sort of the downstream consequences? Have you talked to everybody who can tell you what those things might be so that you have an idea? Are you designing your solution around what the needs are, or do you actually have to build something that you're not thinking of to implement it? And then, of course, the next step, which is it still cost effective? Is it still this great idea that you think is going to deliver, or, you know, have the costs adjusted? Because it's not always as clean as you might think it is. And you know, sometimes I don't think that everybody in the jump to sort of get in the new agenda and try new things always thinks through all those things. And so we actually had a lot of that discussion, and so we're actually doing kind of a slow-go pilot on some of these activities to get a little bit more data before we actually take some bigger steps.
And then just to put it in perspective too, so I know that, Stephen, you mentioned that Jonathan is from a very big agency as opposed to FDIC, but even at a very big agency,
not that big.
Tell us about the sort of the size of the Privacy Program Office. I think that's something that is important to know too, that, you know, sometimes it's a relatively small team of individuals that are working with a lot of IT professionals out there.
So at Commerce, it's very federated, and at the department level, I am the privacy office. It's just me. I don't have any staff working with me on the privacy program right now. I hope to, but I'm not holding my breath given the budget situation. You know,
So you're the guy.
I'm the guy. In some of the bureaus, some of the parts of Commerce, and the Census Bureau in particular, they have some resources dedicated to it, but even the largest one is only 4 people. So
it isn't always no. No is not the answer. It's, you know, you're in a queue perhaps.
It's bandwidth.
Right.
And that's where all these tools that we're creating at the CIO Privacy Committee level come in handy. I mean, you can take checklists, you can come to our website, you know, and just get tons of resources to help you out, you know, so.
Right, because we recognize a privacy person can't be at every meeting where every idea is born, so it's important for us to put information out there to help educate all agency employees and contractors on what privacy is and what the requirements are and how they can help to advance the cause.
But it's never too late to contact your privacy
it's
office.
never too
Never
late.
too late.
Never too late.
And
There's
they
always
often do
something
at
we
the
can
11th
do.
hour.
Right, and there's something we can always do to really help move you along, even if it's one last nugget of advice before you flip the switch. Sometimes that one last nugget can really make all the difference.
Certainly. And we certainly heard a lot, both in your discussion, Stephen, and then earlier today about technologies like SharePoint and you know, other collaboration tools, cloud technologies and other tools that allow agencies to both collaborate internally and externally with citizens and to engage. And I think that, you know, the more proactive that agencies can be in implementing privacy best practices for the use of those technologies, the more safeguards will be in place for all of us and the data that you manage. So thank you all for joining us today, and
Thank you
great
for having us.
discussion.
Thank you.